The Battle of Agincourt, fought on October 25, 1415, is one of the most iconic and decisive battles of the Hundred Years' War, a conflict that spanned over a century between England and France. Agincourt remains a symbol of bravery, strategy, and the stark realities of medieval warfare. Despite overwhelming odds, the English army, led by King Henry V, triumphed over a much larger French force, cementing Henry's legacy as one of England's greatest military leaders. To fully appreciate the significance of this victory, we must journey through the events leading to the battle, the tactics used, and its aftermath, which had far-reaching consequences not just for the war, but for the future of both nations. The Hundred Years' War was not a single continuous conflict, but a series of battles, truces, and sieges between England and France. At its core, the war was about territorial control, with both kingdoms vying for dominance over various regions of France and claims to the French throne. It began in 1337, when Edward III of England claimed the French king, Charles IV, who left no male heirs. The English king argued that his mother, Isabella of France, was the rightful heir. However, the French nobility, under the leadership of Philip VI, denied his claim and instead crowned Philip as king. This tension would evolve into a series of conflicts punctuated by major battles and truces. The English initially enjoyed several early successes, especially due to their superior longbowmen, but by the early 15th century, the tide of the war seemed to be shifting. After a series of political and military missteps, England found itself on the defensive, but the Battle of Agincourt would change all of that. By 1415, the English had lost much of their ground in France. King Henry V, however, was determined to revive his nation's fortunes. Henry had been King of England for only a few years, succeeding his father, Henry IV, in 1413. Although young, Henry was an energetic, charismatic, and shrewd leader, known for his martial prowess and keen sense of strategy. He was also deeply committed to reclaiming his inheritance and asserting his right in France. Henry's invasion of France in 1415 came after a series of diplomatic efforts that had failed to yield the results he sought. He was also facing internal unrest in England as some factions sought to challenge his rule. To solidify his position and unite his country, Henry needed a decisive military victory. The stage was set for a major campaign in France. He began his campaign with a siege on the French port city of Harfleur. After a brutal 2-month siege, the city finally surrendered, but the victory came at a high cost. Henry's army, already diminished by disease and the harsh conditions of the siege, was further weakened. Despite this, Henry remained undeterred. His goal was to march through France and make his way to Calais, which was an English stronghold, but the journey would not be easy. In response to Henry's invasion, the French assembled a vast army under the command of Constable Charles d'Albret. The French army vastly outnumbered the English, with estimates suggesting they had between 200 and 300 men, including knights, men at arms, and infantry. The French were confident of their victory, believing that the English, now weakened by the siege and with little hope of reinforcement, would be easy prey. The English, by contrast, numbered only around 6,000 to 9,000, most of them longbowmen, with a smaller contingent of men-at-arms and knights. However, Henry had a secret weapon, the English longbow. This powerful weapon, capable of firing arrows with great speed and precision over long distances, had already proven its worth in earlier battles such as Crécy and Poitiers. The longbowmen were highly skilled and could unleash volleys of arrows that could decimate enemy forces before they even got close. As Henry's army began to march towards Calais, the French army began to shadow them, intending to shadow them in the force of battle. The English, seeing the size of the French force, attempted to avoid direct confrontation, but the French, eager for battle, pushed on. The two armies finally met in the fields of Agincourt. The stage was set for a battle that would change the course of history. On the morning of October 25, 1415, both armies were exhausted, but the French were confident in their numerical superiority. The battlefield was narrow, flanked by dense woods, which limited the French's ability to fully deploy their superior numbers. The ground was wet and muddy due to recent rainfall, a factor that would play a pivotal role in the outcome of the battle. Henry's forces were positioned on a narrow stretch of land between the woods, with the French positioned on the other side. The English army formed a defensive line with their longbowmen placed at the front, protected by a wall of stakes to prevent cavalry charges. Behind them were the men-at-arms, ready to engage in close combat if necessary. The French Sous-Panchouet, led by Constable d'Albret, had positioned their forces in a traditional formation, knights and men-at-arms in the center, with archers flanking the sides. The French, eager to crush the English, began the assault with their cavalry charging forward. However, the wet, muddy conditions made the French knights' horses sluggish and difficult to control. The heavy armor of the French knights made it even harder for them to maneuver. As the French cavalry struggled to advance, the English longbowmen began to rain down arrows on the French lines. The longbowmen, who could fire arrows with incredible speed and accuracy, decimated the French knights and men-at-arms, who were unable to move quickly due to the mud. The arrows pierced through the knights' armor, striking down even the most heavily protected soldiers. Despite their initial confidence, the French were quickly overwhelmed by the English archers. The French cavalry, unable to charge effectively, was bogged down in the mud. The French knights, desperate to break through the English lines, tried to push forward, but they were met with devastating volleys of arrows from the longbowmen. As the battle raged on, the French forces began to panic. The situation worsened when the French men-at-arms, who had been caught in the open and unable to retreat, were attacked by English infantry. The English soldiers, aided by their longbowmen, began to cut down the French troops in waves. The narrow battlefield made it difficult for the French to maneuver, and their forces were unable to organize a coherent counterattack. The battle quickly turned into a rout, with the French army collapsing under the relentless pressure of the English. Thousands of French soldiers were killed, and many more were captured. The French king, Charles VI, was not present at the battle, as he was suffering from mental illness, and the command of the French forces was left to d'Albret. The lack of coordination and leadership among the French proved to be a fatal weakness. By the end of the battle, the English had achieved an overwhelming victory. Estimates suggest that as many as 6,000 French soldiers were killed, including many of the elite knights. On the English side, fewer than 400 men had been killed. The Battle of Agincourt became a symbol of the power of the English longbow and the tactical brilliance of Henry V. The victory at Agincourt had far-reaching consequences. First and foremost, it bolstered Henry's position both in England and on the international stage. He had not only defeated the French army, but had done so in a way that seemed almost impossible given the disparity in numbers. The victory enhanced Henry's reputation and gave him a strong bargaining position in future negotiations with the French. In the years following Agincourt, Henry V continued his campaign in France, and in 1420 he signed the Treaty of Troyes, which recognized him as the heir to the French throne. This treaty essentially handed France over to England, at least in theory, but Henry's premature death in 1422 thwarted his ambitions of becoming King of France. The Battle of Agincourt is remembered not just for the military victory, but also for its broader implications. It was a battle that exemplified the importance of strategy, leadership, and innovation in warfare. Henry V's use of the longbowmen and his ability to adapt to the terrain played a critical role in his success. The battle remains a landmark moment in history, a testament to how determination, courage, and tactical genius can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The Battle of Agincourt is a story that has resonated throughout history, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and analysis. It serves as a reminder that in war, numbers alone do not determine the outcome. Strategy, leadership, and the will to win can change the course of history.